The Vampire of Wingartentrieba by Art Gaines. Chapter 3. The sun set early, disappearing behind the mountains, but twilight lingered as the mountain's shadow slowly lengthened, and the light that reached the earth beyond the mountain's shadow was reflected back up into the ether, filling the sky with a rich orange glow. The beauty of his environs could not help but impress itself upon Sir Allan, and it struck him how great Adam's sin must have been, to allow himself to be led by the nose by his companion against God's commandment, and so upset the natural order of things that God would curse the beauty of the world, to be marred by the presence of such dark, vicious creatures of the sort that were stretched out before him here. Though he only allowed himself the briefest glance at it, the light which filled the ether above him seemed divine, a foretaste of the glory which is to come, when the light of the heavenly city will fill all the earth, and night shall be no more. When full night fell, Sir Allan pulled his cloak tightly round him, and doubled his vigilance. In their stupidity, many of the goblins forgot to take off their visors and stumbled about, turning their heads this way and that, until their fellows thwacked them upside the head and mocked them. The night grew cold, but not bitterly so. Sir Allan was a large man and well prepared, and well accustomed to the harsh conditions of the wilderness. The goblins built little fires for themselves to warm their hands. The knight glanced upward at the cold night sky. For the moment he could tolerate the discomfort, but if it got much worse, he would be forced to creep away, find some secluded spot, and light himself a fire. Eventually, the kobold doorman was replaced by another sort of creature, a nameless variety of fey beast that seemed to be just as comfortable on 2 legs as 4. In form, it was much like a wolf, but its front legs were uncomfortably similar to a man's arms. Its front paws, though wolf-like, were dexterous, and it clasped a short spear. For much of the night, the scene was brightly lit by the glow of the moon, something not unusual in fairyland, where the moon is nearly always full and is almost never seen in the sky at the same hour as the sun. The presence of Christian churches and Christian souls in fairyland had gone a long way toward imposing order upon the chaos of the spheres, but only in fairy French Caledonia had the cycles of the sun and moon, and their proper proportions, returned to their proper courses and size. In lands like this, near Wingartentrieba, where Christian feet tread in only slight numbers and simple masses were performed only here and there in rustic chapels, the proper patterns of night and day might be found, but the sun was often too small and the moon too big, and the waxing and waning of the moon was fitful and inconstant. Sir Allan was grateful for the companionship of the fairy moon on this night, for it provided greater illumination of his surroundings than he otherwise would have had. In civilized and Christian parts of the world, in this time of year, the moon would be only a small sliver, and only visible for an hour or two. Besides the departure of the kobold and its replacement by the fey beast, nothing else of note occurred over the rest of the night. The vampire did not make an appearance, nor any more of his servants. The goblins continued to play foolish games and gamble, chittering and squealing at each other like pigs. None of them dared approach the fey beast, nor provoke him. When dawn's light appeared once more in the sky, Sir Allan judged that the time to take action had come. The vampire would no doubt take to sleep immediately upon daybreak, as such is vampire nature. Being arrogant, the creature would most likely be in the habit of sleeping on his throne. Such is the vanity of these creatures, their insatiable thirst for adoration, driving them to such foolish practices, so that they can be admired even as they sleep. Vampires, of course, also have coffins, but they generally only sleep in them in fully Christianized places, where they have more reason to fear and hide themselves away at times of vulnerability. Sir Allan's courage did not need much screwing, but not being the sort to put overmuch confidence in his own prowess, although being gigantic, he often faced foes much stronger than himself. And being acutely aware of just how much the entire human race owes their not entirely lamentable state to the grace of God, he prayed once again before springing into action. "Contend, O Lord, with those who contend with me. Fight against those who fight against me. Take hold of shield and buckler, and stand up for mine help. Draw out the spear, and stop the way against them that persecute me. Say unto my soul, I am thy salvation. Let them be confounded and put to shame that seek after my soul. Let them be turned back and brought to confusion that devise my hurt. Let them be as chaff before the wind, and let the angel of the Lord chase them. Let their way be dark and slippery, Jehovah's angel chasing them. As he prayed, Sir Allan reached into his pack and retrieved a small device made for him by the apothecaries of Alsace-Laverne. In form, it appeared to be 6 or 7 tiny trumpets welded together around a metallic orb. The orb contained a compound from the fairy Orient, which, when excited into flame, steadily expelled copious amounts of gas, which in turn excited a small concealed whirligig into motion, carved in such a way to whistle as it spun, a sound which, when amplified by the horns, made a greatly cacophonous din, designed specifically to discomfit and dismay goblinoids and other night creatures of similarly skittish and cowardly temperament. The knight cast one more look toward the rising sun. By this time, the vampire would almost certainly be fast asleep upon his throne, his body dead to the world. In his dreams, he would still be working his poisons upon the girl, though, showing her visions of his strength and steely resolve, promising that she would share in it all, that together, as they hunted, they would strike fear into the hearts of their victims and become intoxicated through indulging in their power. It takes much to wake a vampire. The will required to animate such an undead frame cannot be rousted with alacrity. With any luck, Sir Allan would be able to rush upon him and separate neck from shoulders before he even began to stir. The main danger would probably be whatever other creatures the vampire employed to guard him. With his thumb, Sir Allan depressed the trigger mechanism on the goblin trumpet, then held it up to his ear, he knew what he was doing, to determine if the priming system had deployed properly. He heard a couple of sharp hisses and pops emanate from its interior as expected. Then he swiftly and accurately tossed the device such that it rolled to a stop smack dab in the center of the cave opening. Only a handful of the goblins noticed it, occupied as they were in their games, which involved no small amount of throwing and tossing things. Those who did notice it judged it to be some kind of toy stolen from one of the Christian farms not too far away. Certainly goblins do not create objects of such complexity. A few of them moved to investigate and began to reach out for it, but then they backed off upon seeing that the fey beast had also taken an interest. Standing on its hind legs like a man, the fey beast approached the trumpet, tilting its head back and forth like a dog. Then it turned to look around, trying to determine where it had come from. With its sensitive ears, it was possible that the fey beast could hear something of the chemical combustion that was beginning within the object. Just as the fey beast reached for it, however, it moved of its own volition as the concealed whirligig began to spin, and a piercing, multitonal shrieking began. Clutching their ears, the goblins and the fey beast all staggered away from the screeching device. The goblinoids, with their large, sensitive ears, rolled around on the ground in agony. Some of them crawled as if they had been blasted by fire from heaven. The fey beast, however, had enough sense to stagger back to where he had left his spear, intuiting that greater trouble was coming. Clutching his spear, the fey beast turned with his weapon at the ready, only to catch sight of the enormous form of Sir Allan rushing toward him like a great black thunderstorm, sword flashing like lightning as he came. A veritable angel of death, with a terrifying Christian cross engraved on his shield, the exact sort of Christian knight that little fey beasts are told scary stories about around the campfire at night. Sir Allan's teeth were bared, and he came rushing up to the front gates of the vampire's kingdom, roaring like a freight train with murder in his eyes. With his boots, he crushed 2 cringing goblins to jelly, then punted 2 more like footballs straight into a pile of their fellows, sowing further agony and confusion among the ranks. Seeing all this, the fey beast cast down his spear and hightailed it straight back into the cave. Then, thinking better of his course of retreat, which seemed to be the direction the terrifying Christian knight appeared to be going, he veered off and angled back out of the cave entirely, out onto the mountainside. The fey beast yipped as he ran, straight down the mountain and into the foothills, so great was his terror at the avenging glory of Sir Allan. Totally forgotten were whatever vows of fealty and service he had made to his vampire lord. Perhaps he runs still, yipping in fear, who can say? Scattering the goblins bunched up in the mouth of the cave like 9 pins, Sir Allan charged straight onward until the fear of traps slowed his progress, at which point he slowed and continued more cautiously. Like all caves and underground places in fairyland, the walls and ceilings were luminous, and the night could continue without lantern or torch. It was with some degree of confusion that he did not immediately run into further resistance, and Sir Allan began to suspect that perhaps this particular vampire was of such lowly estate that those goblins and others stationed at the mouth of the cave were the extent of the vampire's slaves. Sir Allan did not expect to have much difficulty finding the vampire's throne. By his estimation, it would probably be located only a short distance within the cave system, within some open grotto which the vampire had decorated to make it look more sumptuous than it really was, with vaporous illusions, tapestries and gilded chairs and tables piled high with gorgeous banquet foods. The girl would most likely be there as well, if not close by. Sir Allan, unfortunately, had miscalculated. At some point during the night, the vampire had become aware of the Mickeleen knights spying upon his front door. By what means? Who can say? Perhaps some vile bird in his employ spotted him and reported it. Perhaps the vampire sensed a human heartbeat outside his gate. Too little is known about the powers of these creatures, or even if they are consistent from one instance to the next. No night creature can truly be ascribed to one particular species. They exist on a spectrum, from the lowliest goblin to the most towering giant. Being aware of the threat, the vampire had thusly remained awake into the daylit hours and devised a trap. When Sir Allan stepped into the throne room, his eyes were immediately drawn to the still form of the pale-robed figure sprawling majestically upon the throne. The creature was robed in black and gold, with a golden circlet around its brow. Its eyes were closed in sleep, and it bore a sneer of cold command upon its lips. The throne room was lit by a single beam of cold light that descended from above. A thing of enchantment it must have been, because the sun was not positioned yet in the sky to cast its light from such an angle. Also, this was an underground place with a great mass of mountain above it. For a brief moment, Sir Allan caught sight of the girl, the farmer's daughter, on the other side of the grotto. She seemed to be unconscious. Then he turned his attention back to the vampire. Scanning the space between them, and also the space above, Sir Allan searched for anything that seemed to be amiss. Not detecting anything, he moved straight forward with a steady stride, readying his sword to decapitate the monster with a single stroke the moment he got close enough. Sir Allan had a lot of experience seeing through enchantments and illusions, but it was not immediately apparent to him that this figure seated before him was in fact a vaporous congelation, an illusion crafted only to give the appearance of the vampire seated upon his throne. In truth, the vampire was behind him, rapidly approaching on silent, slippered feet, with a long, straight knife raised high, soon to descend down upon Sir Allan's neck and shoulders. Allan's step faltered as some part of him sensed something was wrong with the testimony of his eyes. At any other time, he would have interpreted the faint whisper of air behind him as a mere draught, but with his heightened awareness of his surroundings, he knew immediately it must be more than that. Springing around, he managed to get his sword point between himself and the real vampire before the creature could close the distance and strike. The vampire skittered to a halt and bared its fangs. Its face, which had seemed human despite its paleness, momentarily transformed into something quite hideous and alarming, and it snarled like an animal. By its enchantments, it seemed to rise up to an alarming height, and a great hulking shadow built up behind it as if its mass had expanded sevenfold. Its eyes flashed with a flickering, unearthly pale light, and it began to chant some spell in an unknown fey language, some perverse derivation of the Enochian tongue of the antediluvian world. Sir Allan drew back for a moment, but only briefly, to gauge the situation. Then immediately he pressed forward, knowing that more than half of what his eyes told him was an illusion, meant to strike a dagger of ice-cold fear into his soul, riveting him to the spot. Other men would have been frozen, but not Sir Allan. Pulling his sword back, he swung it at the dark shape in front of him with all the force of a great raptor, like the gargantuan rock bird of Saracen legend.